Let me ask you two very important musical questions. The first, what's the most beautiful song in the world? And the second, what's the most beautiful hymn tune in the world? The answer to the first is easy. It's Birdsong. There can be no doubt about that. But the answer to the second is more subjective. But to find the answer and to understand why the hymn tune, which to me is the most beautiful in the entire world, is so beautiful, you'll have to come with me to find out. Welcome, friends. You join me as I sit on a pew in a great cathedral of nature with its towering archways and leafy transepts. This is a village called Tollard Royal. My local followers might remember that I've been here before, but I've never been inside the church. I've certainly never played the organ. There was a reason for that. Last time I came, which must have been a year ago now. As soon as I got to the church, the bells started ringing, and I realised a wedding was about to take place, and I don't think they needed an organist, so I beat a hasty retreat. But I'm back in Tollard Royal, this ancient village, one of the best kept villages in Wiltshire, I believe, although it's actually on the very extreme south of Wiltshire. It's almost in Dorset. And it's good to be back. This is paradise. Solitary paradise. Tollard Royal is an interesting name. It couldn't be much more English than that, could it? Tollard is from the name Tolly, a very early owner of the land here back in the 1050s. And Royal came into being in the 16th century because this village has an association with King John, who had a hunting lodge here. In fact, right next to the church is a very ancient hall house called King John's House. And this estate is the Rushmore estate, which was at one time owned by General Pitt Rivers. I've known about Pitt Rivers for a long time. He collected loads and loads of artifacts from all over the world and created a museum when he donated them to Oxford University. And I used to visit that museum very often. It's very grand and impressive. But here, things are completely different. One thing I forgot to mention when I used my cathedral analogy earlier was the sound of the choir. The birds. How magnificent. And I hope my own music will mingle with that sound as I discover the church organ in St. Peter's Church. I think the scenery opens up to my right, and it should give us a splendid view of this ancient building. If you didn't believe my opening comments about birdsong, then perhaps now you do. It's like an angelic choir, more random and yet more perfect than any music I could produce. And here is St. Peter's Church, set on a steep hill overlooking miles of field and hedgerow, as timeless as nature itself and perhaps just as enduring. Alongside it sits King John's House, whose 13th century core makes it nearly as old as the church itself. It was this house and the adjoining 32,000 acres, which were inherited by Lieutenant General Augustus Pitt Rivers in 1880. He opened part of the estate to the public, Lama Tree Gardens. So, with the insects buzzing around me, we leave the breeziness and the brightness behind and enter the timelessness, the stillness and the calm of the English village church. And what a colourful church this is. But before I take you towards the chancel, on the left here we have the memorial to the said Pitt Rivers, who I mentioned earlier. Augustus Henry Lane Fox Pitt Rivers. And it says here, devoted the last 20 years of his life to anthropological research. A very lavish memorial underneath these bell ropes, which sounded the alarm last time I came. On the left is perhaps the most significant memorial in this church. It's the effigy of Sir William Payne, a knight who died in 1388. And he still dominates this space, doesn't he? With his rather ferocious hound at his feet. St. Peter's, like many other village churches, was thoroughly restored by the Victorians, and you can tell because it's so orderly now. There's a stigma attached to Victorian restorations sometimes, isn't there? Because nowadays we say that the originality of the building is lost. But on the other hand, think of what they were faced with. What kind of building they inherited. They made order from despair, didn't they? And it still stands today. Here in the north transept, we have the pipe organ. This is a very conventional village church organ, but it's really good to be able to see it, and more importantly, to play it, since last time I never got to. It says here, the upper octave of the pedal bourdon was added in memory of Edward Joseph Angel, 1911 to 1997. He must have been an organist here. It's quite charming to have a pedal bourdon added in your memory. I quite like the sound of that. Quite literally, because it's the upper end of the pedal stops. You can see these big wooden pipes. Those are the bass pipes, the bourdon pipes, which, as you know, means buzz. And presumably around the back, there'll be a few more smaller ones, and those were added in Edward's memory. We still have a pumping handle in case there's a power cut. Just above it you can see dozens of names scratched into the woodwork, perhaps of choir boys who pumped this organ at some stage. I see the date 1966, Roy's name, Robert's name, and plenty of initials. But why don't we turn to the organ console itself? Because these organs were meant for playing hymns, the pedal board tends to be quite small because it's not meant for extravagant pedal solos from Bach. This was certainly never meant to play Vidor. It was meant to play Abide With Me. Abide with me, fast falls the eventide. If you felt tearful listening to that, then I'm sorry, but it is, in my opinion, the greatest hymn tune ever composed. To me, it's the best one in the book. And when I say the book, I mean Hymns Ancient and Modern, published in 1861. That publication has gone on to sell millions and millions of copies. But the first version was edited by William Henry Monk, who apparently received no share of the profits. But he did contribute more than anybody else to this hymn book, and his contribution takes the form of hymn tunes and harmonizations of older melodies, by which I mean he put chords to them. And these chords are written in a way that choirs can sing. So, that's the first principle of hymn writing. It's not just the tune, it's what goes underneath as well. Let's devote the second half of this video then to a study of the hymn tune for Abide With Me, which is called Eventide. Bearing in mind the fact that a hymn tune is melody, but it's also harmony, let me play you the hymn tune once again with one vital part missing. Eventide, with one vital part missing, and that was, of course, the tune. So what you were hearing was called the harmony. It's the chords which go underneath the tune, and of course those chords are integral to the beauty of the entire piece of music. But they're not just chords, they are lines. Each one is a musical line sung by an alto singer, a tenor singer and a bass singer. What this all means is that if there were no organist for the singers to sing along to, the music would still work in its fullness unaccompanied. That's because each singer is singing something different. But all of those parts combine to create a beautiful musical composition. So you can understand that the skill of the composer is to be able to write all of these different lines to fit together as music. And that's part of the genius of hymn writing before we even get onto the subject of the melody. Let's stick with the harmony for now, because we now reach one of the most controversial reviews of the hymn tune for Abide With Me. It was written by Stephen Georgeson Hatherley in 1865, so 4 years after the hymn was published. And he wrote this. We find in bar 3 a double minor 7th, in bar 5 an unresolved 4th 6th, in bar 7 a minor 7th resolved upwards, in bar 11 a revival of the ill-sounding discord of major 3rd and minor 6th, and throughout the tune, wherever a discord will stick, there will be such found in 16 chords out of 40. I love the way he analysed the number of chords with problems and counted all of the chords to equal a total of 40. But basically he's complaining that this hymn tune breaks a load of compositional rules, and as a result of that, it's not a very good hymn tune. Mr. Hatherley was criticising this hymn tune in the same way that a school teacher might mark your homework. Bad musical grammar, as it were, like forgetting a full stop at the end of a sentence or a capital letter at the beginning of another. We have chords here which should not be used in succession, containing minor sevenths. We have an unstable chord which transitions in the wrong way. We have an intensely dissonant chord containing C, E natural, A flat. And finally, we have a phrase of music which starts on a discord. That shouldn't be allowed. Or should it? It's all wrong, and yet it's right. And I'll tell you why it's right. It's because music is all about expression. And what are we expressing in this instance? The words. Swift to its close ebbs out life's little day. Earth's joys grow dim, its glories pass away. Change and decay in all around I see. O thou who changest not, abide with me. They're very poignant words. It's a hymn for funerals. You've never heard those words sung at a wedding. And the story goes that William Henry Monk wrote that tune in a moment of total anguish and sadness, I suppose. His wife actually said this. She and him were stood watching the glory of the setting sun, she said, until the golden hue had faded. And then he took paper and penciled the tune, which has gone all over the world. And apparently he wrote it in 10 minutes. So he was feeling very emotional. Perhaps he was thinking about his own mortality, or perhaps about his daughter who had died recently. But you can clearly see that this music perfectly matches these sorrowful words. And that's how music should be composed. It's not written to follow rules. It's written to express yourself, like all great artworks. Let's now turn to the melody of Abide With Me. When I've played hymns for funerals and weddings, I've always been aware of the fact that many people can't sing above certain notes. They're too high, and lots of hymns are completely unfair on us. I would say How Great Thou Art is one of the worst, because it starts really low but goes really high, and lots of people just can't reach the high notes. But if you try and transpose it down to a lower key, then the beginning is too low for some people to sing. So it's awkward. However, this hymn is pitched right in the middle of everybody's range. Absolute genius. Writing something which is not only beautiful but also singable. And now we come to something really interesting. Look at that tune. That's the top set of notes. And then look at the bottom, the bass line, and see how they interact with each other. Almost all the time, the bass and the tune seem to be like a mirror image of each other. They're moving in opposite directions. When one goes up, the other one goes down. And that means that we avoid what's called parallel motion. Imagine a train track. Both tracks are always moving together, aren't they? Well, that's like medieval music in parallel fifths. That sounds quite jarring to the modern ear, and it was banished from music, effectively, after the medieval period. And you can hear why. It's not very satisfying to the ear. It's quite harsh. But if you write in the way that William Henry Monk has, where the soprano and the bass line are working in opposite directions, there's no chance of any parallel fifths or octaves. So it's a hallmark of clever hymn writing. And now we turn to our final point. I couldn't believe it when I found this, when I studied this hymn tune. Just talking about the bass line, listen to it on its own. Those first 5 notes of bass line, did they sound familiar to you? Well, here's a clue. And so on. There it is again. Pachelbel's canon finds its way into yet another piece of classical music. And we must only just be scratching the surface of why this is, in my opinion, the most beautiful hymn tune ever composed. I could never tell you why Birdsong is the best song in the world, but now perhaps you're beginning to understand why this is a masterpiece of composition. I promise that in a few moments' time you'll get to hear the hymn again in full, and I can even do better than that. But I love making this kind of video because I get to take you to a village church and show you around. But I also get to talk about composition and musical analysis, which I absolutely love. There aren't many certainties in this life, but one near certainty is that every week I will be somewhere in the middle of the countryside filming one of these videos for you, and I hope you learn something from them, and in its most simple form I hope that you find them relaxing every week. If you do, please do feel free to leave a small donation to help me out on my PayPal donations page. I'm always trying my best to produce one video a week, which is quite a task, I must admit, when you're doing everything yourself, from the research to the filming and the travelling and the practicing, and of course the analysis and the editing as well. If you'd like to support me, you can click on the link directly beneath this video, and that takes you to my PayPal donations page. And from there you can leave a small contribution if you look forward to these films every Sunday evening. Thank you so much for your help. I truly, truly appreciate it. I'd like to end with a trio of hymn tunes, all by today's celebrated composer, William Henry Monk. And now you know a little bit more about his genius than perhaps you did before watching this video. 2 of these hymns come from Tollard Royal, and one of them is from Stratford Subcastle in Salisbury. I hope you enjoy them. And please do click on the subscribe button if you haven't done already. That just keeps you up to date with all of my future videos. You'll see the subscribe button directly underneath this video, and it should also pop up at the very end. It doesn't cost a penny. Thank you so much for watching and for listening, and I'll see you next time. Cheerio.